when it comes to the college football playoff in 2024, who are some teams that are going to potentially be on the bubble? Now, that's a term you hear a lot in college basketball when it comes time for the tournament to be played. But this is a brand new world of college football we're moving into now. You're going to have a 12-team playoff. In the next 3 years, we're going to have a 14-team playoff. So what's the cutoff for getting into the dance? From where I'm sitting, there's a lot of talk around 9-3 and the resume and eye test, and I think that's not untrue. I think if you're 9-3, you need to kind of have that same situation that you would have when you walk into class without your homework or you're late to class period. It's like, hey, need a note. Need to have you excused for this. This doesn't usually fly with us. I think 10-2 is probably going to be the cutoff when it comes to teams making the college football playoff in 2024. And the SEC has been a talking point throughout the course of really this entire lead up to this college football playoff, in the sense that there's a lot of teams that are going to have a chance to make it into the dance. And so with that being the case, when you have a lot of teams that are contending to be in the dance, you're going to have a lot of teams that are probably on the bubble. And a team that just screams on the bubble to me from the jump is the Tennessee Vols. And a lot of y'all in Knoxville watch this show, so shouts to y'all. We appreciate you for that. I think if you're trying to go 10-2, the games that you circle as the big ones for you are Georgia and Alabama. Now, the question in terms of them getting off that bubble and into the dance is, what version of Nico Iamaleava do you get, and how soon do you get him? Because if you got first year Nico, you got up and down Nico, you got trying to figure out, the SEC Nico, well, then you're probably looking somewhere at a 9-3, 8-4 situation, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but it wouldn't be what you prefer for the first year of the Nico Iamaleava era. But if you get the 5-star Nico, you get the number 1 overall player in America in the 2023 class Nico, as we had him here in On 3, at that point, I think he is the difference maker for you in games where you have comparable rosters, those swing games, the game at Oklahoma, the game against NC State. I think at that point, 10-2 is much more attainable, and I think that's kind of the difference for them getting into the college football playoff and doing some damage when they get there. Staying in the SEC, LSU, their odds to make the college football playoff in Vegas right now are plus 125. When I look at LSU, here's my thought on this. Defense, it's no secret. That's the price of admission, brother. That's how we're getting you in the dance. But if you really want to get paid, if you want to feel good about your chance to get into the dance and really make some moves when you get there, it's got to be the offense continuing on what they did last year. Now, that's asking a lot. I don't think they need to score 40 a game to have a chance to make the college football playoff. I think you'd probably settle for somewhere north of 35, though. The defense has their work cut out for them when you look at the schedule. You got USC, Ole Miss, Alabama. I also wouldn't sleep on the game against Florida or Oklahoma, and who knows what A&M is going to be now with the new staff out there. The bottom line is here, defense, you got to bring something to the table. If you copy and paste what last year's defense was into this season, it's going to be a long year in Baton Rouge, and they already know that. Brian Kelly knows that. That's why he went out and got himself a whole new defensive staff in Blake Baker from Missouri. All right? And Bo Davis from Texas, defensive line coach. So I like the way they're shaping up on that side of the football. I think the offense, I don't think they'll be Jaden Daniels' Heisman Trophy level of good. 3 first-round picks on that offense, good like they were last year, but that's not what you need to get into the college football playoff. The big reason why I'm circling LSU as a bubble team, and a big reason why I think that the national opinion on them is a little bit lackluster, is we're looking what's going on paper right now, which is fair. That's what you do at this point in the year. But I don't think there's enough attention being paid to Brian Kelly and the year 3 bump he typically has. Year 3 at Cincinnati, took him to a BCS Bowl. Year 3 at Notre Dame, took him to a national championship. I'm just saying, if we're trusting the trend here, Brian Kelly knows what he's doing. He told us on this very show, yeah, year 3, I'm usually pretty good. Paraphrasing, but Brian Kelly's words, not ours. I'm going to take him at his word. There's no Georgia. There's no Texas on the schedule for the Tigers. I like LSU, man. I like them a lot as a bubble team. Missouri is one that is really, really fascinating because the schedule for them is super manageable. Bama is their toughest game. Outside of that, there really isn't a game that you circle and say, yeah, Missouri's just going to be outmatched here. Again, on paper. My question for them is, in terms of getting into the college football playoff, can the offense keep them at cruising altitude? Because that team I just talked about a second ago, LSU, they now have their defensive coordinator that helped lead the charge for that defense a season ago. They also lose a decent amount of production from last year's squad on the defensive side of the football. Now, the good news is, on the offensive side, yes, you lose Cody Schrader. That's not an easy guy to replace with how much production he had last year, but you do bring back Brady Let Him Cook. And, in addition to that, the best wide receiver in all of college football, Mr. Luther Burden, who we are planning with right now tentatively to sit down with at Media Days. So the offense, I believe, has to just keep pushing this thing forward. I don't think you'll get the same kind of defensive product you had last year, but with the star power you have on offense, there's no reason why you can't push the throttle down with this schedule and be a college football playoff team, and that's a big reason why a lot of folks are high on Missouri coming into this season. Now, Ole Miss is interesting too. I hesitated to even put Ole Miss in this conversation as a bubble team because you check out the odds in Vegas, y'all. Lane Kiffin and the boys, minus 125 to make the college football playoff. Minus 125. For context, that is better odds than Alabama. If I told you this time last year, fast forward the tape in 2024, and Ole Miss will have better odds to make the college football playoff than Alabama in a 12-team field, you'd probably look at me like I was a little bit crazy. The games for them are at LSU and Georgia. That's it. That's it. And if we're being honest right now, you probably feel pretty good about your chances against LSU based on what happened last season and based on your portal acquisitions and based on LSU not having Jaden Daniels. Not picking it right now. I'm just saying, so don't clip this and put it out on the Twitter sphere as my pick when that game comes around. 10-2 will be good enough for them if they get into the college football playoff. I expect them to be a playoff team. This is probably a segment for a later show, but is making the playoff good enough for Ole Miss? I think you'd be happy when it arrived, kind of like Christmas morning. You're happy when you finally get to sit down under the tree. It's amazing. It's Christmas morning, but now you're worried about the presents. Now you're worried about what you actually got for Christmas. It's like that old children's book. If you give a mouse a cookie, what's it going to want? Some milk. If you haven't read that book, I would encourage you to do so. Very helpful for this college football playoff era. But regardless, the SEC, a ton of teams that are going to be in that discussion for the playoff. I think those are the ones that are most firmly on the bubble as we sit here right now in July. So that's the SEC, but there's a couple more teams that need to be talked about when you talk about bubble teams. And I wasn't sure how to distill it down to just one team, so we kind of got a more overarching category here for these next two. What is the runner-up in the ACC looking like when it comes to their playoff aspirations? Because you look at the top three teams when it comes to the odds in Vegas, it's Miami, it's Florida State, it's Clemson, all relatively in the same neighborhood when it comes to their college football playoff odds. My big question is, does 10-3 as a conference title runner-up get you in? Show them that 10-3. Oh, but hey, we were second best in the ACC. Oh, you know what? We'll pull back the velvet rope. You walk right into club playoff. Is that how it works? I don't know that that's how it works, to be honest with you. Because the hypotheticals I've run through here are very intriguing. Like for Clemson, let's say that they lose to Georgia and lose to Florida State. In theory, right now, those would be the best, quote-unquote, two losses. And then they go to the title game. Let's say they rematch Florida State. They meet up with Miami. Hey, how you doing? They lose that game. 3 losses, we said already during this segment, is typically a no-no getting into the playoff. But if you're the second best in your conference, does that change things? Florida State. Let's say they lose to Notre Dame and they lose to one of Miami or Clemson. So you already got a quality win on there, assuming that you beat one of those two. Losing the ACC title game to take your pick out of Miami or Clemson or some other dark horse. It's intriguing. It's very intriguing. The one that would make me the most nervous, though, if I finish second in the ACC with a 10-3 record, is Miami. Because I wonder how much meat on the bone they really have when you look at this schedule. Because I'm looking at where you would find a second loss outside of the ACC title game in the regular season, and I don't know that there's a super attractive one on the market there. Florida, I think, is probably, from a roster perspective, the most quality, quote-unquote, loss paired with Florida State. But if you're losing to Florida State, again, with this hypothetical, if you're the runner-up, and you're losing to somebody else in the regular season, is there one that really looks that good? Like Louisville? No shade on the Cards, man. I'm all about the Brom squad, all right? I'm all about the Ville. I'm a big Jack Harlow stan. I'm waiting for another album. Virginia Tech. I love Virginia Tech. Number one in returning production. I think they're going to be awesome, but are they really moving the needle when it comes time for you to compare resumes? Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but if you take those two losses plus an ACC title loss, I don't know how that would factor in. So I think what's going to happen here is when you get a college football playoff resume test, it really comes down to the quality of loss, as we already mentioned, and the eye test. Now, if you are a Florida State fan, you hear the eye test, you're already like, oh my gosh, not again. Not again. Good news is you win the conference, you're in. There's no way they're keeping you out. But I do think that that's something to maybe think about as we move on throughout the regular season here. I will give my take on this, though, for the ACC. From a roster standpoint, they deserve to have two teams in. Now, will the season play out that way? I don't know, but they deserve to have two teams in. The Big 12 runner-up is where it gets a little bit more fascinating. I think that they only get one team in. That's my opinion, because I think the conference itself is going to be like the Purge, where just all crime is legal against anybody any given Saturday, and it's going to be just anarchy. You got four teams that I think are good and that could all, quite frankly, win it. It might be deeper than those four. Arizona, Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State. But, I have a very difficult time believing we're going to get to that conference title game and have two 10-win teams. Like 10-2 versus 10-2. I don't think that's going to happen. The intriguing part of this, I just said, I think it's a one Big 12 team that gets into the dance. But the way that it becomes a conversation is if you get like an 11-1 Utah in Jerry World versus, let's just call it a 9-3 Kansas State, if it were to shake out that way. Kansas State wins, so they're in. Are we really leaving an 11-1, now 11-2 Utah out of the college football playoff? I don't know. That's a tall ask. That's a tall order, but that could be a path. One more on the bubble team for us to talk about here, and it's Vegas doesn't think they're on the bubble. Vegas thinks that they deserve to be in based on, or they're projecting good odds for them to be in the dance, that is. Notre Dame. Notre Dame and their preseason odds to make the college football playoff is minus 170. So for those of y'all that are unfamiliar with what that means in the gambling world, you have to bet $170 to profit $100. All right, so Vegas is saying, we like Notre Dame, we like their path, they're going to be in good shape. Look at the path now. It's pretty nice. They're at A&M to start the year. You got Florida State, and you finish with at USC. Outside of that, Notre Dame should be licking their chops. Should just be looking right down the barrel and saying, okay, this is our year now, year 3 for Marcus Freeman. Went out and got that boy Riley Leonard from Duke, who was throwing down windmill dunks in high school. He's playing quarterback for us. That's a good vibe. We got pieces via the portal. I've been pounding the drum for Jeremiah Love the entire offseason. I think he's going to be an absolute stud for you. A lot of pieces now for Notre Dame. But I think the thing to look at for them is what happens if they have a lackluster performance against two of those three teams. They finish the year at 10-2. They don't get a conference title game, right? They don't have an extra chance to make a statement on a national stage on that final weekend of ball for all of us. 10-2, I think you would really hope that those two losses, whether it be to an A&M and a Florida State or USC, whoever that ends up being to, and I guess if it's not to one of those teams, you'd hope whoever you lose to ends up doing their job. But you would hope that those three take care of business the rest of the way and make that loss look good if you end up being 10-2. Now, at 11-1, I think you're in good shape. 10-2 would make me nervous because I don't know who we're being compared to for Notre Dame. And what makes me more nervous, if we're compared to, let's call it a 10-2 Big Ten team that's out of the conference title game, how do we stack up strength of win and strength of schedule overall? Or let's just call a spade here, the eye test. Are we more impressive than let's call it a 10-2 Penn State? Potentially. I'd probably take Notre Dame's roster at this point in time over a 10-2 Penn State, but it just leaves a little bit too much up to chance if you go 10-2. So I think 11-1, you're in there. The schedule's manageable. But for me, Notre Dame, I think, is a bubble team of sorts moving into 2024. So let me know in the comment section. Let me know on Twitter and Instagram at JD Pickell. Who do you believe is currently on the bubble as we move into the glorious thing that is the 2024 college football season? Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.